Oh, sorry, this morning. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Let me see. Yeah, that's your phone. Hey, Vince, come grab this mic. Mic check. All right, man. So, destruction of Nicanor. It's a beautiful feast, memorial that we have. That as I mentioned to other brothers that say first time and sisters that they first time. The same thing that America has its own holidays for the Marines and memorials for the veterans and all those type of things. The same thing that we got in the scriptures. We memorialize for the ones who did good for us. We don't memorialize the ones who continue to keep us in hell and captivity. So we here right now, memorial or Salakia, destruction of Nicanor is a good story. It is a lot of history. So we're gonna dive into some history. It's gonna be some reading. I won't keep y'all too long, but Masha's gonna be reading a lot. So we're gonna be reading and diving into it. I know it's Vince's first destruction of Nicanor. Anybody else? Anybody else's first one? Jacob. Oh, we got a good amount. All praises to the Most High, man. Give him a hand clap. That's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. All praises. So let's go ahead and open it up. Let's get Job chapter 8, verse 8. Job chapter 8, verse 8. So we're going to get the understanding. We're going to know the context of where we was at this time. Who is Nicanor? Who is the main characters at that time? Where were we? And why are we celebrating today? Get Job chapter 8, verse 8.
Job chapter 8, verse 8. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age.
So we already know the Most High, he says, inquire of the former age. Why? It's because it's history that we learn. We got to learn this history. Sometimes, people don't like going into history. Sometimes people don't like just sitting down and read and going through the chapters. And because the names look different. Or they can't pronounce the names. They don't know the time period of everything. But we know that the Most High, he said, blessed is he who what? Who readeth, right? So we got to do these things. So the scripture says, search out thy fathers, right? Go ahead.
And prepare thyself to search of their fathers.
And prepare yourself. You got to prepare yourself for the search of your fathers. Because there's a lot of times we be so disconnected with history. Certain things that we did in the scriptures, we're like, man, how do you do that? Or certain things that they did, it's just unfamiliar in our lifestyle. Go ahead.
For we are about of yesterday and know nothing, because our days upon earth are a shadow.
Our days upon earth are a shadow. Give me Exodus chapter 15, verse 3. So one thing you're going to realize with this story that we're about to read over is that it's really, just to summarize it, is really the celebration of the destruction of your own enemies, which is the Edomites. We went to war with them and we conquered them. So it was something the Most High was like, man, y'all better memorialize on this every year and remember this, right? Exodus chapter 15, verse 3.
Exodus chapter 15, verse 3. The Lord is a man of war.
The Lord is what?
The Lord is a man of war.
The Lord is a man of war. I know a lot of people stay away from the Apocrypha. Like I mentioned my Joe Witness lesson before. Joe Witnesses don't follow the Apocrypha because it's just a book of war. They don't like reading it. They say it's just too many war stories in there. But as we know, these wars, if it's in the Bible and it's something that is placed in here, it's placed for our learning, huh? Right, read that again. Go ahead.
Verse 3 again. The Lord is a man of war.
Right.
The Lord is his name.
The Lord is his name. He a man of war. Give me a Proverbs chapter 11, verse 21. So I'm not going to try to go too quick, but we did start late. So I'm going to try to just simplify it the best I can so you understand who is the main characters, who is Nicanor, what is the time period that we in, what captivity are we under, and the reason on why we got to celebrate it every year. So get that Proverbs chapter 11, verse 21. You're going to realize this as well in the story.
Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 21. Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished.
So that's one thing too. It says, read it again.
Though hand join in hand.
It says, though hand join hand, what?
The wicked shall not be unpunished.
The wicked shall not be unpunished. So, a lot of people, they be so, they got this mindset of thinking that the Most High just care about and love everybody, that he's just accepting everybody, regardless if they put us in captivity, regardless if they put us in chains, regardless if they killed our babies, regardless of everything, that we all just supposed to be equal, right? But what does the Father say? Read it again.
Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished.
So regardless, as you will see in this story, majority of our feasts and our celebrations that we celebrate is based off the destruction of our own enemies. And that's true love for his children, which is us, right? Everything that you read right now, or what we're about to go through, you're going to see just plainly that we're memorializing the Most High wanting us to celebrate because we overcame our enemies. So that's the same thing that we're doing right now here in America. So it's a lesson that we get to learn from it, right? Is that all of that?
But the seed of the righteous shall be delivered.
The seed of the righteous shall be delivered. So a lot of times, a lot of people, they know about Passover. They know about the history behind Passover. They can tell you from front and back of everything about Passover, but sometimes we kind of skip over the destruction of Nicanor because some history that we got to get into. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first thing first, I'm going to ask a question. What president, do you know, what captivity was we under for destruction of Nicanor? Who knows? Who knows? Vince. What captivity do you think we was under? And then pass it to Jason afterwards, if you don't know.
First one, but I would guess Roman.
Roman, no. Go ahead. Close though, you're really close.
Persians and Medes.
No. Jacob.
Greeks.
Khan. So we was under the Greeks. Who was before the Greeks?
Persians and Medes,
The
right?
Persians and Medes. Khan. So right now we're gonna jump into the Greeks because the Greeks is the captivity that we was under. Let's go to 1 Maccabees, chapter 1. 1 Maccabees, chapter 1. And we're gonna start at verse 1. You got to go ahead. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. So the Greeks, so before we went into the Greek captivity, we was under the Persian Mede captivity. So that's why we have the Apocrypha, because the Apocrypha breaks down the Greek captivity. When you read the normal King James Version, you'll get all the way to Malachi. Malachi prophesied while he was in the Persian captivity. And then out of nowhere, then they just jumped to the Romans. It was a big time gap. So the Greek captivity is what we're talking about right now. That's why, and it's already backed up in secular history, that the destruction of Nicanor actually occurred. Or the Maccabees family was actually there. But why is it not in the scriptures? They don't know. Or the scholars don't know. But 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. Go ahead.
1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip.
So this is Alexander the Great, which we went over this before, but this is just a reminder for whoever don't know, whoever doesn't know, right? This is Alexander the Great, right? Or Alexander the Greek, or Alexander the Free, or whatever you want to call it, right? Go ahead.
The Macedonian,
Uh-huh.
who came out of the land of Chittim,
Mm-hmm.
had smitten Darius, king of Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
So Greeks conquered the Persians and Medes, right? Alexander, he was going through and he divided and he conquered, right? And he became to be the next one that had a majority of dominion within that region, right? Go ahead.
And had made many wars
Uh-huh.
and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. And went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils in many nations.
Mm-hmm.
And so much that the earth was quiet.
The earth was quiet. They was in fear of him. This is the first time that the so-called white man or Esau is actually coming into power as a whole. Now they was always present throughout the scriptures. They was like generals or helping out whoever was in charge. But they didn't have complete dominion until Alexander the Great came, and that's around 323 BC. Right? Go ahead.
Was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up.
Mm-hmm.
And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries upon him.
So all he's saying is basically that he divided and conquered. Everybody's paying taxes to him as Esau do now. Go ahead.
And after these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die.
What did he die from? Does anybody know? What did he die from? That, and it's the reason why we call him Alexander the Free, right? Syphilis, because he practiced homosexual acts. He was a defiled beast as Esau is, right? Go ahead.
Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive.
All right, next question. So who is his servants? I know Caleb not in here. He always be trying to do that one. But now this is an opportunity for Gadol, Jacob, Ramayak, Vince, you learning, all the brothers to go ahead and go. Who is the four generals of Alexander the Great? 4 generals of Alexander the Great. Seleucid. Ptolemy. See, Linda be knowing too. I gotta call them the sisters too. My bad. Go ahead. So we got Ptolemy, we got Seleucid, we got 2 more. One start with an L, one start with a C. No, you don't got it? All right, so we got Cassander, and then we got Lysimachus. Make sure you write these things down. Now, it's very important to know what this is, because then you know how Esau divided his kingdom and how he continued to conquer. This is secular history that you can learn. So then after that, so he has 4 generals. Go ahead.
Verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died.
And then he died, and he gave his 4 generals. They had their part. Everybody had their own region. Jump down to verse 10.
Verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed
Epiphanes. Oh, that's a name that means God manifest. So he felt like he was the Most High, right? Go ahead.
Son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks.
So he reigned, right? And read verse 11.
Verse 11. In those days there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us.
So it's the same exact thing that we did in America, the same exact thing that we did with the Greeks. Is that we wanted to make a covenant with them, we wanted to be just like the Greeks. So if you skip over this history, then once you get to the New Testament where it says no difference between a Jew and a Greek, you're going to get confused. Why? It's because we made a covenant with the Greeks so we could be like the Greeks. The same way we made a covenant with America so we could call ourselves American, or whatever you want to call it. Right? So that's the same exact thing. Go ahead.
For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow.
So since we departed from them, we have much sorrow. So the same thing that we did when we was in the Egyptian captivity. Once you start to realize with all these feasts, as you read the scriptures and the history, history repeats itself. It's a constant, repetitive thing that you start to realize, and it's really a cycle. And it becomes the same thing that we do, because we are the people. We the people in this book right here. We're the people who did those same exact things. So it is something that it is good to dive into this, even though it can be a lot of information, but it's good to dive into it and know who these people are. All right, so now we know we're in the Greek captivity. That's where we at right now, right? So now we're going to get into these are the key people within the story. You know, Nicanor or Nicanor, whatever you want to call them. As far as the destruction of Nicanor or Nicanor. We have Demetrius. Demetrius is the king at this time. And then we got Alchemist. Alchemist is an Israelite. We're gonna know what type of Israelite he is. And then we have the Maccabees, or the Maccabees, Salakia, the Maccabees, which is a family, right? So these are all the 4 to 5 individuals that we're gonna cover right now. So first thing first, let's jump into the Maccabees. Who is the Maccabees? You know, have y'all read about the Maccabees? Y'all know about the Maccabees, Khan? What feasts do we keep to celebrate what the Maccabees did? Go ahead, Jason.
Dedication.
Dedication. Why, right? It's because we keep dedication for the rebuilding of the temple, which was started by the Maccabean revolt. So now we're going to cover the Maccabees, or who is the Maccabees. So now we read in the first chapter, Alexander the Great, he reigned. He has his 4 generals, right? And then he dies off, and his 1 general out of those are 1 man, Antiochus, who comes up into power, and he wants to be like the Most High. So his whole idea, read verse 41. Jump down to verse 41.
Verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people.
So he wanted everybody to be one people, something like the one world order. It's the same thing that they was doing back in the Greeks, right? Go ahead.
Verse 42, and everyone shall leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yeah, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion.
So they made a law that it was everybody just one people. We all one nation under God. It sounds familiar, don't it? We all one people. We don't need no religion. We love everybody. It was the same exact thing they was doing in the Greeks that they doing in America, right? Go ahead.
And sacrifice unto idols and profane the Sabbath.
And unfortunately, a lot of Israelites was like, okay, well, we just gonna do it because we didn't want to be the outsiders, or we didn't want that the judgment of looking at what the Greeks had, which we're gonna get into what they wanted to do for us. Go ahead.
For the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, and they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths in the festival days.
So it was the same exact thing. They was in captivity. Let's jump down. We'll jump down verse 48. Go ahead.
Verse 48, that they shall also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinance.
So the same exact thing. That's so crazy. History really repeats itself. So the same exact thing that America does is exactly what the Greeks is doing, as you can see. So let's jump over to chapter 2. So we're in the time of the Greeks. We have these kings. They want us to forget our law. So now we're going to get into the Maccabees, who the Maccabees was. So let's jump down to chapter 2, and you can read verse 1. Mattathias.
There we go.
God.
First Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, the priest of the son of Jorah, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin.
So now there's an individual, his name is Mattathias. This is the father of the Maccabees, or this is the father, and he had 5 sons, right? Go ahead.
And he had 5 sons, Jonan called Kadas, Simon called Thassus, Judas, which was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Abiram, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis.
So Judas is the main one, but it's this whole family who actually revolted, but he's the main one within this story, destruction of Nicanor. Continue going. Verse 6.
Verse 6, and when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me.
So the same thing that we do as we go on the street corners and we warning our people from the ways of America is the same thing that they was doing at this time. Go ahead.
Before was I born to see this misery of my people.
So he had a great heartache. He was like, before was I born to see this misery of my people. He didn't like seeing his people being killed, because in the Greeks, they put us in chattel slavery too. They actually, it's documented that they even sold us the same way that America sold us. We were sold on slave blocks as well. We was even put on ships. It's documented in Second Maccabees. Go ahead.
And of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the land of strangers. Her temple became as a man without glory.
And at this time, we had our own temple, our sanctuary where we would go and worship. But our temple became defiled because the heathens came into it and they defiled our own temple. Go ahead.
Her glorious vessels was carried away into captivity. Her infants were slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy.
Right. When it says our young men with the sword of the enemy, meaning a lot of our people was choosing side of the Greeks. The same way as our people choose side of America, they go and fight their own wars. That has nothing to do with us, right? Go ahead.
What nation have not had a part in her kingdom, and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman, she is become bound slave.
Bond slave. So what he's talking about is Israel as a whole. Israel as a whole is in a very bad condition. And this family, ruled by their father, which is Mattathias, made sure that they revolted and they didn't follow the ways of the heathen. They was the outsiders. And there was a lot of other Israelites that followed them. And there was a lot of other Israelites that didn't follow them, right? Go ahead, you can jump down verse 17.
Verse 17, then answered the king officers and said to Mattathias of this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city.
So in this scenario, the king Antiochus, he already knew that Mattathias was a great man. He knew his reputation the same way as we have our athletes. We have our great men that we look at as being great. They felt the same thing about Mattathias. So the king was like, man, we're going to send some of the officers down and let's go and talk to him. Go ahead.
And strengthen him with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thy first and fulfill the king's commandments.
So he started boasting them up. He said, I know you're a great man. I know you have so many great followers. I know your sons is great. So he said, why don't you come down to the White House? Or why don't you come down and follow the king's commandment? Go ahead.
Like as all the heathen have done. Yeah, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain in Jerusalem. So shall thy and thy house be in the number of the king's friends.
He was like, why don't y'all just come down and y'all will be my friends. Y'all will be my friends, right? And we already know that Esau is he gonna talk good to you in front of your face, but then he gonna stab you in your back, right? Come on, go ahead.
And you and your children shall be honored with silver and with gold and with many rewards.
So he said, man, I'll make sure that you got money. I'll make sure you don't have any issues. Your children's gonna be good. You're gonna be good. Anybody, your friends is gonna be good, right? Go ahead.
Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice. Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, but fall away every one from the religion of their fathers.
So he says, though everybody is following you, what are we gonna do? Go ahead.
And give consent to his commandments. Yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers.
He says, I and my sons and my brethren will walk in the covenant of our fathers. So this is why we memorialize this specific family, and what they did is because they stood up while nobody else was standing up. They was the true revolutionaries at this time, right? Go ahead.
God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinance.
So they didn't make any excuses about us being in captivity, therefore we can't keep any type of laws. They said, God forbid that we shall break the laws of the Most High. So this is the same response that we have to have, the same courage that we have to get while being here in captivity as well. Go ahead.
We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either the right hand or the left.
So he said, we're not going to go from our religion, from our customs to y'all customs, right? So now we get an introduction of who the Maccabees is. So far we covering that we in the captivity of the Greeks, and that this king wants us to be like them. And then now we had a family ruled by Mattathias. He has sons, and we revolted. We said, we're not going to do that. Go ahead.
Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin.
God. You can actually, let's jump down because we don't want to read this whole thing. Read verse 32. 31, Salakia.
Verse 31. Now when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret places in the wilderness.
So regardless, they knew that they was wanted at this time. They disobeyed what the king said. The king put a hit out on them, but they still made sure that they kept the Sabbath day. They still made sure they kept the laws regardless. So they had to go to secret places, right? Read verse 32.
Verse 32. They pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day.
So what the heathen did was like, okay, we're going to try to take advantage on the Sabbath day. Why is it? Because the Sabbath day is a day of what? A day of rest. So the heathen was like, well, we know it's a Sabbath day for them, so that's when we're going to go and make war with them. And it was a time past when our people was like, it's a Sabbath day, so we can't fight back. But then the priest was like, nah, y'all better fight back. But there was a time when we did fight back, and a lot of people got slaughtered. So then the priest came in and was like, no, y'all got to fight back because we fighting for our laws and our lives at this point. You got to defend yourself, right? Let's jump down. Now let's get to Judas Maccabees, which is one of the sons, right, of Mattathias. Let's jump to chapter 2. First Maccabees chapter 2.
First Maccabees chapter 2.
Oh, Salakia. First Maccabees chapter 3. First Maccabees chapter 3, let's read verse 1. Now y'all definitely want to reread this whole thing and just learn about the history of the time in the Greeks, the Maccabees family and everything. Go ahead.
First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 1. Then his son Judas, called
Maccabees
rose up in his stead.
So Maccabees, his nickname, and they call him the Hammer, is because he was ready for war at all times. Read verse 2.
Verse 2, and all his brethren helped him.
He said all his brethren helped him, right? Go ahead.
And so did all they that held with his father.
And he said all they that held with his father too, that knew of his family at this time. He said, man, they had a pact They had a pact together, and they made sure that they continue moving forward, even against odds, right? Go ahead.
And they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel.
It says they fought with cheerfulness. So at this time, we wasn't real sensitive. We wasn't sensitive individuals. When you look at our ancestors in the way that they was revolting, is that they didn't have any worries about death that much. They knew that it was death. At the same time, they tapped into that I don't care spirit. All right, we just gonna have to do what we got to do for our people. See, a lot of times right now, we kind of so disconnected with that. It's because we so spoiled here in America. But a lot of times, when you look at our ancestors, they were so independent. They knew that death was just a part of life, but they did it for a good reason, right? They knew if they did it for the Most High, they did it for His word, that there was something greater after this point. Go ahead.
Verse 3. So he gave his people great honor and put on a breastplate as a giant and girt his warlike harness about him. And he made battles, protecting the host with his sword.
So he went out there. He said, I'm making battles with the Greeks. He didn't have no worries. He said, I'm making battles with the Greeks. All my brethren and all my friends is going to be with me too. And they had his back. Now, I'm not saying everybody, because as we continue reading, there was some sellouts, unfortunately, as Israel do. But at this time, he was on a high stool, and he was ready for battle. Go ahead.
In his acts, he was like a lion, and like a lion's whelp, roaring for his prey.
Right.
For he pursued the wicked and sought them out, and burnt up those that vexed his people.
It didn't say that he was hiding. It said he pursued the wicked. So he was all for the business, as you could say. So Maccabees, they was going out. He said, look, we going out. We're pursuing them. We ain't hiding no more. We're pursuing them because this war, we got to do this because we fight for our laws and our land. This is what we do. This is who we are for our life. Go ahead.
Wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him.
And guess what? The Most High was behind him at this time. He said the wicked shrunk for fear, right? Go ahead.
And all the workers of iniquity were troubled because salvation prospered in his hand.
See, he said salvation prospered in his hand is because he kept the Most High first. See, we got to realize that the key to your success in everything that you do starts with the Father. Whether it's war, whether it's any problems that you have, it starts with the Father. Go ahead.
He grieved also many kings.
It said he grieved kings. Now you got to remember, Esau was coming up right now. He was already up. He was on a high horse at this point. He was already checkmating all throughout the regions. Esau, he came from the caves, but then he went through every civilization that made them him, right? So at this time, for them to rise up the way they did was a big courageous thing. Go ahead.
It made Jacob glad with his acts, and his memorial is blessed forever.
Right.
Moreover, he went through the cities in Judah, destroying the ungodly out of them, and turning away wrath from Israel.
He said he even went to his own people. He even went to his own people and destroyed them, because unfortunately, as we read in chapter 1, a lot of our people was like, well, we just gonna be Greeks. We just gonna slide there and consent onto they laws and they customs, right? So they was big on doing that. So unfortunately, as we know, the Most High says it for us too, right? We go out to the street teach. It says we shall be fishers of men, but eventually, what are we gonna be? It says we gotta be hunters. So it's the same thing. We gotta tap into that spirit because that's what the Maccabees was doing. That's exactly what they did. This is exactly what you see right now when we read it. Jump down, or Salakia. Go ahead, continue reading. We won't go too far.
So that he was renowned unto utmost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together and a great host out of Samaria to fight against Israel.
So of course, the heathens gonna fight up, and they gonna gather our own people as well. Go ahead.
Which thing when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him.
They say he went forth to meet him. See, that's the cold part. He went straight to him. Go ahead.
And so he smote him and slew him, and many also fell down slain, by the rest fled.
He said, but the rest fled is because they was fearful. So basically, as you continue reading on within this chapter, you're going to realize that it was a lot of battles that happened. So even though they had those main 4 generals, those generals had their own regions, and then they had their own generals as well. So they had their own sections, and as you continue reading, the Maccabees and the rest of Israel that joined with them was fighting against them. So one by one, you will see they was getting cut off or getting slain. Go ahead and jump down to chapter 3. Oh no, we already in chapter 3. Read verse 13. Go ahead. Yeah.
Now when Saron, a prince of the army of Syria,
So now this is a different area. So now they're going in this area. Go ahead.
heard say that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude in company of the faithful to go out with him to war.
So the word started spreading. Like, who is these Maccabees? What? Judas Maccabees, Israelites. Now they in captivity. Remember, in Persian and Medes, we was in captivity too. So we was in captivity under Persians and Medes. The only thing difference with the Persians and Medes and everybody else is that we was able to go back to our land. But when the Greeks came in, it was like, forget y'all land. Forget all that. This is what we doing, and y'all Greeks now. So it was courageous thing for them to go ahead and rise up like this. So you see the name of the Maccabees is starting to spread out in Syria. Go ahead.
And he said, I will get me a name and honor in the kingdom, for I will go fight with Judas.
So now this man, his name is Saron, he was a prince in Syria. He was like, man, the same way as Judas Maccabees is getting the name like that, the same way as he being bold and winning these wars, he said, I'm going to do the same thing. He is Syrian, right? Go ahead.
And then that are with him who despised the king's commandments. So he made him ready to go up. And there went with him a mighty host of the ungodly to help him.
So he gathered up a whole host. He had his own little army. Go ahead.
And to be avenged of the children of Israel.
But he wanted to go for the Maccabees. Go ahead.
And when he came near to the going up of Beth-horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company.
See, now at this point, he had a great army, but Judas was like, okay, I'm still going to meet him. I know where he's going. I'm going to meet him. They had a small company, right? Go ahead.
Who, when they saw the host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to
So
fight?
when Judas, he took his army over to fight these individuals, and his army, the Israelites, was like, man, how are we going to fight versus them when it's only a few of us? And look at all those men, right? Go ahead.
Being so few to fight against so great a multitude and so strong, seeing we are ready to faint with fasting all this day.
And on this specific day, they was fasting. How y'all be feeling on Day of Atonement? Y'all ready to go fight on Day of Atonement? Can y'all don't even be having no energy to get up. Y'all be sleeping all day just so the day can go away, huh? See, I know on the Day of Atonement, everybody be drained. But the Maccabees, it was fighting in the midst of fasting. Now, it could be from fasting just because they fasted because they wanted to get closer to the Lord. But imagine that. Imagine if the heathen came out here on this Day of Atonement and you had to fight. You going to run back there and get some water? Now, you can't do that because that's putting your faith on the line. And that's the cold part. And that's a different type of faith level in order to be fighting in the midst of fasting. That's crazy. Go ahead.
Unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few.
See, but Judas, that's why sometimes it's so important to have a leader. Because he said with Judas, he was like, man, it ain't nothing for a whole bunch to be shut up. He said it ain't nothing for a whole bunch to be shut up by a few. Go ahead.
And with the God of heaven, it is all one.
He said with the God of heaven, it's all done in one. Go ahead.
To deliver with a great multitude or a small company.
He said whatever it is, you deliver with a great multitude with a small company. Go ahead.
For the victory of battle standeth not in a multitude of an host, but strength coming from heaven.
But strength coming from the heavens. So a lot of times, people will faint. Imagine at this time, put yourself in this position where you go on to war, or put yourself in a position where everybody is against you, where it's illegal to even be an Israelite. Put yourself in that place where you have to be in war and you're surrounded by other heathens who's ready to slaughter you. And that's a different type of level of strength that you got to have. Now, I know a lot of times we say that we'll die for the word. A lot of times we say we'll die for Christ. Or a lot of times we'll say, man, this is my life. But in reality, when that thing is right in front of you, how really are you going to overcome that? Are you really going to overcome? So we read these stories out of encouragement because read verse 19 again.
Verse 19, for the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of an host.
It says the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of hosts, meaning not a lot of individuals. What does it say about the gates of heaven? It says wide and narrow, or what is it? Narrow is the path, right? But wide and broad is the way to destruction. See, a lot of times people feel like, oh, I'm gonna just go with the crowd. I got the most followers. I want to be a part of this because you feel more stronger in the midst of a whole bunch of members, right? You feel more secure. But we got to tap into that where we can feel confident within ourselves and have faith in the Most High. That's how you test your faith. Read verse 20.
Verse 20. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us.
And Maccabee and Judas at this time, he said, man, they coming in pride. They coming in pride right now. They come in iniquity, which is sin, to destroy us. And what?
And our wives and our children, and to spoil us.
He said they was coming for our wives and our children. So you don't got no other choice at this point. Go ahead.
But we fight for our lives and our laws.
He says we fight for our lives and our laws. You keep going.
Wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. Now as soon as he had left off speaking, he leaped suddenly upon them. And so Sauron and his host was overthrown before him.
He said it was overthrown. It was overthrown because of their faith there. Jump down to verse 27.
Verse 27. Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation. Wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm. So
King Antiochus is like, man, who is these? Who is these men? What they think they doing? Remember, King Antiochus, he called himself Epiphanes, which is God manifest. So he said they talking about the Most High God, that he give them strength. Blaspheming the word right now, right? So he, at this point, he's like, man, who is these men? Let me gather up my strong army now. Go ahead.
Even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year.
So he was like, man, I'm about to get the best army. I'm going to pay them off for the whole year. Go ahead.
Commanded them to be ready wheresoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasure failed, and that the tributes in the country were small, because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land, and taken away the laws which had been of old time. So
basically what's happening right now is that he was realizing that he was taking everybody's money. He was taking everything, and they couldn't even pay him taxes, so they was at a low state. Go ahead.
He feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, for he had abound above the kings that were before him. Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia. So he determined to go into Persia. Now, who did the Greeks conquer? It's the same thing. So he's like, man, let me go back there. They was ruling. They might be able to help me out now. Ain't that something? That's something Esau do, though, right? He go and bomb you and then ask for you to pray for him afterwards. Go ahead. There to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money. So he left Lysias, a nobleman and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates until the borders of Egypt, and to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again. Moreover, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem. Jump down 36. And that he should place strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot. So the same thing. He does a divide and conquer method. Verse 37. Verse 37. So the king took half the forces and remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, 147th year. And having passed the river of Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Yeah, good. Go ahead. Verse 38. Then verse 39. Go ahead. Okay, so verse 38 is basically, this is where Nicanor is getting introduced up. So it's a whole bunch of other generals. So he went to go get the top men, and Nicanor was one of the chief. They call him the prince, but he was one of the top generals that was coming in. Right. Go ahead. Verse 39. Verse 39. And with them he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah and to destroy it. He said, man, we about to destroy the land. Read verse 40. Verse 40. So they went forth with all their power and came to pitch by Emmaus, and the plain country, and the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves.
Right. So this is the cold part too, because not a lot of people be knowing that. The same thing, you know, the fraternities we call ourselves Kappa and all this type of stuff. Not realizing you just claim yourself another oppressor, just in another time, during a different time. It was the same exact thing. They put us in, it said they sold us as slaves. Sold us as slaves under the Greeks as well. Go ahead.
A power also of Syria, and of the land of the Philistines, joined themselves unto them. Now when Judas and his brethren saw the miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in the borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them. They said one to another, let us restore the decayed estate of our people.
So you have to restore the decayed state of our people at this time. They was being put into chattel slavery the same way that America did the same thing. It was the same exact thing. So they had to restore our people mindset and everything that they were seeing and giving them hope again. It's because they was no longer feeling like, okay, we don't have no hope. I mean, imagine your city is getting what is it? They set up borders around your city and coming in. That's the same thing that they did with the sieges in Rome. See, you saw he always uses the same methods of war. It's the same thing that he does since the beginning, since the end, because what he says, if it's not broke, then don't fix it. So the same exact thing he did in the Greeks, they did it in Rome, they did it in America, in Babylon the Great. Go ahead.
And let us fight for our people in the sanctuary.
So you have to give them hope, man. We got to fight for our people in the sanctuary, which was the temple. Go ahead.
Then was the congregation gathered together, that they might be ready for battle.
He said, man, I have to gather the congregation together and let them know, man, it's time for war. It was time for it. It was no other option. Go ahead.
And that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion.
But you know, the first thing that they did is that they prayed and they asked mercy and compassion because they knew that everything that was happening is the Most High will. So sometimes you got to get like that too. You know, it could get bad. We know things is going to get bad. In the New Testament, it says that the earth is going to get worse than it's ever been. Like that it says the time in the end is going to be worse than whatever the earth has ever seen. So that tells me that something coming that we ain't even prepared for. The only thing you got to do, though, you just got to pray to the Most High, and at that time, ask for compassion and mercy and hope He save you. And that's the same exact thing that they was doing here. You got to put the Father first. Go ahead.
Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness.
Same thing as it is right now. Jerusalem is a wilderness. They ransacked Jerusalem. Go ahead.
There was none of her children that went in or out.
So they won some battles. So it was still a war. Remember, it's a war. Sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't. Go ahead.
The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. And the heathen had their habitation in that place.
So they even set up shop within our own land. They set up shop in our own land where we keep our feasts, where we kept our temple, our monuments, and everything. The same exact thing. Go ahead.
And joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Masphat over against Jerusalem. For in Masphat was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel.
Right. So then we won't read the rest of this chapter. We'll jump to the next chapter. But basically, as you continue to read it right here, you'll see that even the heathen, once they moved into our area and set up shop within our sanctuaries, they even took our artifacts as well, and they painted the images like their images. So same thing that they did with Caesar Borgia or our Christ, right? They painted their images to make it seem like the ones that was in the scriptures was actually them. So the Greeks was doing the same exact thing. You can read that in verse 48. But jump down to chapter 4, and let's read verse 1. Go ahead.
First Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 1. It took Georgius 5,000 footmen and 1,000 in
Salakia, my bad. Can you jump up to verse 58 of chapter 3? 58 down to 60, and then we'll jump into chapter 4.
First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 58. And Judas said, arm yourselves, and be valiant men, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, and that ye fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us, and our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people in our sanctuary.
So that right there, man. He said, for it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our own people, of our people. That reminds me of the times, I don't know if you ever heard it, but it's a group, I don't got the name for it right here, but it's a group basically where they got off the slave ships, right? They said they walked back into the water because they'd rather die rather than become a slave. I forgot the exact quote, but that was something that really happened. A lot of times our people was like, man, we just I'd rather die than be a servant. And that's the same mindset that the Maccabees was on right here. Same exact thing. He said, for it's better for us to die in battle than behold the calamities of our people in our sanctuary. They didn't want to see that destruction. They didn't want to see our land get ransacked like that. They was prideful about what they had. Read verse 60.
Verse 60, nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do.
They said, let the Father's will be done, so at the same time. Now you can jump down to chapter 4, verse 1.
Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed all the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And with the men of the fortress were his guards. So
Gorgias is another general, which Nicanor is about to come up. But Gorgias was like, man, we're going to get them by night, during night while they sleep. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed and the valiant men with him, and that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. And the mean season against Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas, and when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains. For said he, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords in their minds.
So that's crazy. So he said it would basically, at this point, Judas already knew that they was coming at night. So he woke Israel up and was like, man, we gotta get out of here. So when they came, but he said we're gonna fight them during the daytime though. But it was only 3,000. It was only 3,000 of them. And the Greeks, as you continue reading this chapter, it was 135,000 Greeks that they had on account. 135,000 Greeks, but it was only 3,000 Israelite men that was sitting there, but they was ready for the battle. And guess what? It said they didn't have no armor or swords. So it is what it is. They were just ready for that. God, go ahead, keep going.
Verse 7. And they saw the camp of the heathen, and it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen. And these were expert of war.
He said, man, they expert at war. And the same thing we looking at America, they expert at war, huh? Imagine us going and fight the military right now. You're gonna be like, the hell, we don't want to fight no damn military. You don't got no weapons. You don't know how no combat. You barely got any type of energy to even fight them at this point. But see, at this, they was like, man, we still got to do what we got to do. Read verse 8. Go ahead.
Verse 8. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude.
You see how Judas, every single time he seen that his man was weak, he was like, man, I'm going to talk to them. He said, don't fear, right? Go ahead.
Neither be ye afraid of their assault.
He said, don't be afraid of their weapons. None of it. Go ahead.
Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea.
He said, remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea when we was under the Egyptians? He said, the Most High still made a way. Go ahead.
When Pharaoh pursued them with an army.
He said, Pharaoh was pursuing us with an army. We was fleeing in the wilderness and came to the sea. The Most High still made a way. Go ahead.
Now, therefore, let us cry unto heaven. If pre-adventure, the Lord will have mercy upon us.
He said, man, so you know what we're about to do? We're about to cry into heaven. And if we hope that the Most High can have mercy on us. Go ahead.
And remember the covenant of our fathers.
He said, I hope you remember the covenant that he made.
And destroy this host before our face this day. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivered and saved Israel.
Right.
Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them.
So he said, man, after that prayer, they was like, man, we're going to see the Most High deliver us. We pray he do. You still got to go to war. You put in that circumstance, you still got to go through it. Go ahead.
Verse 13, wherefore they went out of the camp to battle. But they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets.
They had their trumpets with them. See, that's a big thing. The trumpets was something that we carry with us all the time. So I know we got to get better on getting them trumpets. I need a trumpet. I only got a trumpet. But that was something that we carry with ourselves. So we could sound the alarm in a way. But still, man, we was crying into the Most High still at the same time. Go ahead.
So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomforted, fled into the plain.
He said the heathen was discomforted, and they fled into the plain. Go ahead.
Howbeit, all this hindmost of them were slain with a sword, for they pursued them.
He said they pursued them. So basically, at this point, he said the heathen, for some reason, some fear just dropped on them. Some fear dropped on them. Now remember, it's 135,000 Greeks, and it's only 3,000 Israelite men right there. They sound the alarm, and they said for some reason, the heathen felt discomfort, and they fled. And what Israel do? He said they fled. I mean, they pursued them. They didn't run away like, oh, okay, they gone. They pursued them until where? Go ahead.
Unto Gazara,
Uh-huh.
and unto the plains of Idumea,
Uh-huh.
and Azotas,
Uh-huh.
and Jania, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men.
Uh-huh.
This done, Judas returning again with his host from pursuing them.
Jump down, verse 23.
Then Judas returned to spoil the tents.
So he said after they pursued them, then they spoiled the tents and took what? Go ahead.
Where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches.
So he took all that the heathen had at the time. You know what that's called? That's called guerrilla warfare too. Is where you take whatever your opponent has as well when you don't have any weapons. That's the same method that they use. But they made sure they even take the silver and the gold and everything that they had. Same thing that we did in Egypt, the same thing that's prophesied for Babylon too. Go ahead.
Verse 24. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving.
See, they was happy, they was joyful. Say they sung a song for Thanksgiving. Go ahead.
And praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endured forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day.
Jump down, verse 35.
Verse 35.
34 is lucky, my bad.
Verse 34. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain.
So the battle continued even after they had a conqueror on that one day. They still went through it, and they was still winning every battle. The Most High was with them. Read verse 35.
Verse 35. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die, valiantly.
So he said, man, they was bold. He said, man, I'm fearing these men. He said, my army is afraid of these men because they acting like real men. And they don't care about death. They said they ready to live or die, whatever it might be. So he said I put fear in the army of this man right here. Go ahead.
And to gather together a company of strangers, and having made his army greatly than it was, he proposed to come again into Judah.
So he was like, all right, well, these men, you're good. He's like, all right, well, these men right here, they afraid. They afraid. So he went, he was like, I'm going to go get some more, right? The same exact thing. He was like, I'm going to go get some more. Go ahead, verse 36.
Verse 36. Then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfort. Let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up unto the Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, the gates burnt up, the scrubs growing in the courts and in the forest, and are one of the mountains.
Right. So now when you read this chapter, they just cleaning up the city. They cleaning up the environment where they was at, the sanctuary, everything. Right. Let's jump to chapter 7, First Maccabees chapter 7. And then that's going into a little bit more of the rededication, but it happened multiple times. So First Maccabees chapter 7. So now in the midst of this, so far where we at? So now we know we are with the Greeks. The Maccabees, they go on to war with multiple individuals, and they win in every single battle. But now, in the midst of this all, something else happens, right? Israel is on top. They win in every battle. All the kings is afraid. The message is getting spread throughout the area about the Maccabees and these Israelite men. So read chapter 7 now. Let's read verse 1. Go ahead.
First Maccabees chapter 7, verse 1.
Uh-huh.
In the 101 of the 50th year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, departed from Rome.
So now time went on. Now the king Demetrius comes up, and we're going to see what happens. Go ahead.
And came up with a few men unto a city of the sea coast, and reigned there. And as he entered into the palace of his ancestors, so it was that his forces had taken Antiochus and Lysias to bring them unto him.
So he said, man, his forces, they was taken away. They was taken. So they was already dying off, and now you got this new king, Demetrius. Read verse 3.
Verse 3, wherefore, when he knew it, he said, let me not see their faces. So his host slew them. Now when Demetrius was set upon the throne of his kingdom, there came unto him all the wicked and ungodly men of Israel.
So in the midst of this all, imagine Israel on top. Israel was having a good time. They cleaning up their sanctuary. And it says, there came unto him all the wicked and ungodly men of Israel. Go ahead.
Who was desirous to the place.
Read verse 5 again.
There came unto him all the wicked men and godly men of Israel, having alchemists, who were desirous to be high priests with their captains.
So all the wicked men, right, of Israel, they came with this individual, alchemist or alchemist, and he was desiring to be the high priest at this time. Go ahead.
And they accused the people to the king, saying, Judas and his brethren have slain all thy friends.
Look at that. So now this king come up, right? And he looking at all his friends being killed off. And like, man, what's going on? And then this Israelite come, and he's like, man, Judas and the Maccabees, they killed him. Be your own people, huh? Crazy. Go ahead.
And driven us out of our own land.
He said, man, they driven them out of your own land. This is yours, right? Go ahead.
Now, therefore, send some men from whom thou trustest.
He said, go ahead and get your officers who you trust and send them over to talk to him. Go ahead.
And let him go and see what havoc he had made amongst us and the king's land.
So this is an Israelite speaking. Remember that. Go ahead.
And let him punish them with all them that ate them.
So he said, man, go to these Israelites that's in the land. And he said, this is your land, king. This is your land. He said, go into that land and go see what havoc they did and everything that they done over there and punish them. Go ahead, read verse 8.
Then the king chose Maccabees, a friend of the king who ruled beyond the flood and was a great man in the kingdom and faithful to the king.
So as you're going to see, the king, now he's like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to this man. Now remember, this man wanted to be a high priest. So there's a second account that we're going to switch over to 2 Maccabees, chapter 14. We're going to come back to chapter 7 at the end. 2 Maccabees, chapter 14, chapter 3. It's going to go into a little bit more detail on how he did so with alchemists. So this is an Israelite, right? Overall, it brought jealousy, and this is envy and jealousy that he had for Judas, because Judas was a high priest at this moment, and he wanted to be the high priest. He wanted to be in that position. Matter of fact, hold that. Give me Matthew chapter 10, verse 36 real quick. So Alchemist, he wanted to be in that position. He didn't like the fact, even though that our people was going at war, but it was still some jealousy because he wasn't the one that was being honored. He wasn't the one that was getting that recognition throughout the regions. He wasn't being that one. So he went to the king like, man, you should set me up as high priest. Get that, Matthew chapter 10, verse 36.
Matthew chapter 10, verse 36. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household.
See, that's why Christ, he had to give us that warning. Unfortunately, majority of our own people don't really want to see our people. Well, they want to see our people do well as long as they get the recognition of why we doing well. And that's the bad part. So as you see, and that happened all the way from Genesis to Revelation. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Every story has happened from Genesis, from what? Cain and Abel, right? From Christ to to Christ and Judas, right? So it's going to continue to happen. These things are always relevant. What did Christ say? He said, man's foes is those of his household first, or his enemies is of those of his household, which is your own people, unfortunately. That's why the Most High said 2/3 got to go. Because unfortunately, I couldn't even imagine our people going, our children and our wives being destroyed, and our sanctuary and our city getting destroyed, and then somebody still want to go and bring that back onto us just because they want to be in power. That's crazy. Give me Romans chapter 9, verse 6. And then we'll go back to Maccabees to finish it off. Romans chapter 9, verse 6.
Romans chapter 9 and verse 6. Not as though the word of God had taken none effect. For they are not all Israel, which are of Israel.
So just because you're an Israelite don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing at all. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that, for those brothers that teach that, oh, Israel just going to be saved. I don't know. In this circumstance, it don't seem like it. In this circumstance, it don't seem like it because, unfortunately, we know that our people be the first ones to kind of sell us out too in order to get some benefit from it. So back to the main story. Go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 14. So right now, Israel went through multiple war under Judas. They went through war. They was winning war. They regained the city. There was a time period that went up, right? There was a time that went, and then King Demetrius was like, man, what's going on? So then, in the midst of this, Alchemist, which is an Israelite, goes up to Demetrius, sits down with him and tell him, it's some Israelites over there that did this. He said, they need to be punished for this. And while you punish them, set me up as high priest. Set me up in the king's office, right? So this is what's going on. So now we're getting back to it. Go back to the 2 Maccabees chapter 14. And now how we jump down. Read verse 3. Go ahead.
2 Maccabees chapter 14 and verse 3. Now one Alchemist who had been high priest and had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles.
Now look at that. So it was saying that he was during the times when they was mingling with the Gentiles. He said he was willfully doing these things. He was the first one, like, nah, we need to do these things. That's the type of characteristic that he had. He wanted to be the high priest. Go ahead.
Seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, came to the king Demetrius in 101 in the 50th year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also of those which were used
You jump down verse 5.
solemnly in the temple. And so that day he held his peace, howbeit having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise.
So he just seen an opportunity. So it said he had an opportunity to further his foolish enterprise. He seen a way for him to get into office because, of course, he wasn't about to be no high priest acting the way he was acting. So he's seen like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to go ahead and get in. Go ahead.
And asked how the Jews stood affected and what they intended. He answered thereunto. Those are the Jews that were called Assyrians, whose captains is Judas Maccabees, nourish war or seditions, and will not let the realm be in peace.
Jump down to verse 8.
Verse 8. First, verily, for the unfeigned care I have of the things pertaining to the king. And secondly, even for that I intended the good of my own country.
So he was boasting up the king. He said, man, I'll do everything for you, basically. He said, I'm at your services, right? Go ahead.
For all our nations is in no small misery, nor the unadvised dealing of them aforesaid.
Verse 9.
Verse 9. Wherefore, O king, seeing thou knowest all these things, be careful for the country in our nation, which is pressed on every side according to the
clemency
of thy readily showing unto all. For all long as Judas liveth, it is not possible that the state should be quiet.
So basically, he putting his brother under the bus. He's saying, look, King, you're not going to live in peace. You got a rebellious individual that's on this area he needs to be dealt with, basically, in a sense. So all he's saying is, but the reason is because he wants to be placed in that position. So he boasting up the king. He telling them that as long as Judas liveth, you're not going to have no peace. It's not going to be no one love all people, because Judas is going to continue to rebel. Go ahead.
Verse 11. This was no sooner spoken of him, but others of the king's friend, being maliciously set against Judas, did more incense Demetrius.
Verse 12.
And forthwith calling Nicanor, who had been master of the elephants and making.
So now this is when Nicanor gets introduced, because this Israelite, he went to the king, boasted him up. So the king was like, all right, well, let me call my best general that I got, which is Nicanor. He said he was the master of the elephants, and he made him governor over Judah. Right? Go ahead.
And make him governor over Judea.
He
sent him forth, commanded him to slay Judas.
He said, look, you come, I need you to slay Judas now. Go ahead.
And to scatter them that were with him, and to make alchemists high priests of the great temple.
So he said, look, we need to go and slaughter Judas. So this man, now this is where Nicanor is getting introduced. This is the greatest general that he has. This is his chief. And he said, look, I need you to slaughter Judas, and I need you to make alchemists a high priest while you're doing it. So now let's go back to First Maccabees. So this is where Nicanor is getting introduced. So First Maccabees chapter 7. We'll finish it off down here. And let's start, let me see. Go ahead and start at verse 14, or Salaki, 15. Oh no, verse 13, you good. Yeah, 13.
Verse 13, now the Assyrians were the first among the children of Israel that sought peace of them. For said they, one that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come with this ornament, and he will do us no wrong.
Jump down, verse 16.
16. Whereupon they believed him. Howbeit he took of them 80 men and slew them in one day, according to the words which he wrote. The flesh of thy saints have they cast out, and their bloods have they shed round about Jerusalem, and there were none to bury them. Wherefore the fear and dread of them fell upon all the people, who said, there is neither truth nor righteous in them, for they have broken the covenant and oath that they made.
Jump down verse 20. So basically what's going on right now is that eventually they wanted to make a peace. Esau always tried to say peace, right? He always tried to come and be in a peaceful way. Go ahead.
Then committed he the country to alchemists and left him the power to aid him. So Bacchades went to the king, but alchemists contended for the high priesthood, and unto him restored all such as troubled the people, whom after they had gotten the land of Judah into their power, did much hurt in Israel. Now when Judas saw all the mischiefs that alchemists and his company had done among the Israelites, even above the heathen, he went about into all the coast of Judea round about, and took vengeance of them that had revolted from him, so that they burst no more against forth into the country.
So Judas, man, he found out about alchemists trying to be in a high priest position and being a wicked Israelite, right? Read verse 25.
Verse 25. Of the other side, when alchemists saw that Judas and his company had gotten the upper hand.
And alchemists seen it. He seen that Judas was getting the upper hand. It was still because they had the Most High on their side. Still, right? Go ahead.
And knew that he was not able to abide their force. He went again to the king and said all the worst of them that he could.
So alchemist, he was like, man, I'm about to turn it up a notch. I'm going to go speak to the king and say even more things that's worse. Read verse 26.
Verse 26, then the king sent Nicanor, one of his honorable priests, prince, a man that bare deadly hate unto Israel, with commandments to destroy the people.
Right.
So Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a great force and set against Judas and his brethren deceitfully with friendly words, saying, let there be no battle between me and you. I will come with a few men, and I will see you in peace.
See, just like how Esau do, he said, man, let's just have peace. I ain't coming to destroy you. Let's just have peace. Let's make what is it? What do they call it? A pact, right? Let's just make that. We'll be strong together, right? But Nicanor already knew from the jump that he was commanded to go and do what? To slay Judas, right? To slay him. Go ahead.
Verse 29. He came therefore to Judas, and they saluted one another peacefully.
And they saluted one another peacefully. Go ahead.
Howbeit, the enemies were prepared to take away Judas by violence, which thing after it was known to Judas, to wit, that he came unto him with deceit. He was so afraid of him, and would see his face no more. Nicanor also, when he saw that his counsel was discovered, went out to fight against Judas. Besides,
you read verse 32. Go ahead. So basically, right now, Nicanor exposed, right? He exposed, and it's wartime now again. Go ahead.
Camp of Salamis, verse 32, where there were slain of Nicanor's side about 5,000 men, and the rest fled into the city of David.
He said he's slain on his side 5,000 men, and the rest they fled into the city, right? Go ahead.
After this went Nicanor up to Mount Zion, and there came out the sanctuary certain of the priests and certain of the elders of the people to salute him peaceably, and to show him the burnt sacrifice that was offered to the king. But he mocked them and laughed at them and ambushed them shamefully.
Abused them.
Oh, damn. And abused them shamefully, and spake proudly, and swore in his wrath, saying, unless Judas and his hosts be now delivered into my hands, if ever I come again in safety, I will burn up this house. And with that, he went out in a great rage.
Man, so Esau was mad, and they was making fun of him. So he said, man, if y'all don't deliver Judas, I'm going to come and burn up this place. Go ahead.
Then the priest entered in and stood before the altar in the temple, weeping and saying, Thou, O Lord, doest choose this house to be called by thy name, and to be a house of prayer and petition for thy people. Be avenged of this man and his host.
See, first thing Israel do, and it's just over and over again, right? First thing Israel do is they went and they prayed. They prayed to the Heavenly Father. Go ahead.
And let them fall by the sword, remember their blasphemies, and suffer them not to continue any longer. So Nicanor went out of Jerusalem and pitched his tents in Bethlehem, wherein hosts out of Syria met him. But Judas pitched
in Adasa.
With 3,000 men, and there he prayed, saying, O Lord, when they were sent from the king of Assyrians, blasphemed, thine angel went out and smote 180,500 of them.
So man, he giving a reminder. He said, man, I was out there with 3,000 Israelite men. We prayed to the Most High like you was with us. You was with us, right? So it's the same thing. Go ahead.
Even so destroy thy this host before us this day.
He said, destroy this one the same way, right? Go ahead.
That the rest may know that he has spoken blasphemily against the sanctuary, and judge thou him according to his wickedness.
And we gotta remember this one right here, Nicanor. This is the top man. This is like you playing video games, you get to the boss. This was like Nicanor. He was up there. Right. Go ahead.
So the 13th day of the month Adar, and hosts joined battle.
So this is what it is. The 13th day of the month Adar, which is where we are right now, because Adar is what the Greeks use, right? Go ahead.
But Nicanor's host was discomfort, and he himself was first slain in the battle.
He said he himself was first slain in the battle. So it wasn't even no war. It was Nicanor was the first one to be destroyed. That's like the general getting killed when he's taking his army out. That doesn't happen usually, right? But Nicanor was the first one to get destroyed. Go ahead.
Now, when Nicanor's host saw that he was slain, they cast away their weapons and fled.
And the rest of his army was like, hey, the general, he dead, and we casting away our weapons and we fleeing. We done. Go ahead.
Then they pursued after them a day's journey from Adasa unto Gergera, sounding an alarm after them with their trumpets.
Same thing that we did with those 3,000 and 135,000. We pursued them. We pursued them. So we didn't let them just go free. We pursued them. Go ahead.
Whereupon they came forth out of all the towns of Judea round about and closed them in.
The people in the city, man, they joined. They got them too. Go ahead.
So that they, turning back upon them that pursued them, were all slain with the sword, and not one of them was left.
He said not one of them was left. They was all destroyed. Go ahead.
Afterwards, they took the spoils and the prey and smote off Nicanor's head.
That wasn't it. It was like, man, we need we need something to take back. It's like a trophy. The same thing that they do with our people, the same thing they did with our slaves, right? It's like, man, we about to cut off his head. We want to take this back. Go ahead.
In his right hand.
And his right hand.
Which he stretched out so proudly and brought them away and hanged them up towards Jerusalem.
He said they hanged it up just so Israel can remember and look at that. Go ahead.
For this cause the people rejoiced greatly, and they kept that day a day of great gladness. Moreover, they ordained to keep yearly this day, being the 13th of Adar. Thus the land of Judah was in rest a little while.
So it was a celebration that they had. It's because it was continual war, and after that point, it was a continual war, and after that point, they was able to rest, and they was able to have some joy. Imagine your kids, man, your kids getting destroyed, your wives getting destroyed, everybody getting killed in war. And after this time, they had a time of rest, and they was joyful. So this is why we celebrate the destruction of Nicanor, is because it was the Most High showed that it doesn't matter about how many you have, it's about who's with you, which is the Father, right? So that's why we keep this every year, and it's a commandment. That's just what it is. Anybody got any questions? I know it's a lot of history, but it's just a little storyline. You gotta think of it kind of like a movie and how it is, but it's really just warring us, destroying our enemies. But yeah, you got any questions?
Man, I learned a lot of words.
Learn a lot of words?
I learned a lot of words.
Hey, you did good. Man, all praise be to the Most High, man. All right, well, we don't got no questions, man. Then we'll wrap it up. Shalom to all the family that's online. Appreciate y'all tapping in. Happy destruction of Nicanor. We'll see y'all this Shabbat, or we'll see y'all tomorrow, actually, because we got Purim coming up now. Now we're going to celebrate Purim and another revolutionary story. So all praise be to the Most High. We appreciate everybody for tapping in. Shalom. Yeah, that was